Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarchy's Dave, and today I'm joined by Guy Sclanders from How to Be a Great GM. So you're just asking me, what are we doing today? I'm like,
Yes.
well, I've done so many of these. I'm just circling back to the friends that I miss and then inviting them on.
Well, that's a good thing. That's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
good thing. I mean, I look back at what we used to do, and it was a lot of fun. I think the other day, actually, on my Facebook, there was a stream for Save or Dice
yeah.
way back when. And I think of those crazy days, and it's like, yeah, those were good days. What has happened since then? Oh, yes, the world fell apart.
The end times
The end
are
times,
upon
right?
us. Yeah, yeah. Oh man. What are you gonna do, man? I can't wait till I can get back to hanging out with my friends in person. We're actually about to start gaming in person again next month, so that's exciting.
That is interesting. We're not allowed to do that yet, not in the UK. Uh,
So what we've been doing is like comparing everyone's vaccination dates is pretty much like it, and it's like okay, like everyone is well past their vaccinated in 2 weeks, so
right. Yeah, yeah. UK has been pretty good. We're now down to the 18 to 25-year-olds are being vaccinated now, so they've
okay.
moved on that pretty quickly. But our law is still no more than two households can mix inside a private home at the moment.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah. So
I don't know. The laws here are all over the place depending on what state you're in. And
right.
then like here it's open for anybody that wants it. I think we're getting to the point where the problem is like now they're coming up with like kooky radio stunts to get people to get vaccinated. Like, we'll give you a beer and a shot. We'll give you a savings bond. You're in the lottery for $1 million.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's crazy when you look at it. You go, okay, well, here is this thing. You have to go get this thing, and if you don't get this thing, there's a chance that you'll die,
Yeah.
right? But you got to try and convince people to go and get this thing. And I look at it, and there was a war that was fought in South Africa many hundreds of years ago, and these people were stuck inside a siege. And every day, cannons would fire these giant shells into the town where the siege was happening, and the residents got so used to the idea of being shelled every single day that they would actually stand outside and wait to hear the whistling of the shells so they could try and figure out where the shell was going to land. And then they would rush towards the impact zone, because if you could retrieve the iron that shell was made out of, and the iron, you
Yeah.
could sell that on the black market for a nice profit. So the military had to issue an order saying that if you were seen running towards the impact site of the shell, you would be shot because you were endangering other people's lives. And it's like, I think humans are just nuts. It's like, this will kill you. Okay, I want to do it. This
We
will
can
kill
get,
you.
well, that's
I'm
the
not going to
problem.
do it.
It's not that. I want to say it's that we're so adaptable, we can adapt to anything.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Well,
true, actually.
I
That is
worked in
true.
heavy construction for about 10 years before I went like full time doing this. And
Hmm.
I worked in and around construction all my life. And, the level of comfort that those folks would get, working out on the highway with traffic whizzing by at 70, 80 miles an hour, around heavy equipment and machinery. And let's face it, like, a miscalculation of 6 inches and like it's done, it's over, right? There's no do over. And it's just like you get so used to it, and the older the guys were, the more you would see them where they would just kind of, they just wouldn't care. Like it was normal to them.
Yeah.
So inches away from traffic or the machinery, every year, like it's like somebody went over under this machine, someone got ran over by a sweeper. I was on a job where it got shut down because one of the inspectors was talking on his phone and following the dump trucks as they do their thing, tripped and fell, and ran over his legs, all kinds of
Oh my
like
God.
crazy stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
So
right. Humans adapt. We adapt. I mean, isn't
for
that the
better or
standard?
worse.
Yeah, well, exactly. Isn't that like the standard sci-fi trope that aliens don't want humans in the cosmos because we adapt to everything and breed and just take over? So I don't know.
Yeah. But so Are you going to be doing any in-person gaming once things open up, or is all your gaming kind of online?
Well, all my gaming at the moment is online, and that's by necessity. But
Yeah.
also because I've just moved to London. I say just moved. I've been here now for a year and almost a half,
Mhm.
but it's been a year and a half of lockdown. So I haven't really been able to make new friends in gaming circles. And I mean, the irony is the building I live in has a clubhouse, which is where every Thursday night a giant gaming club would get together to come and game.
Oh no.
And that's one of the reasons why I found this place, was because I came for the first night of gaming, met some people, and then was told, okay, now you can't see them again for another year and a half because everyone goes home. So,
And
oh,
also,
absolutely.
somehow you've driven Janet and Dimitri out of the UK.
Yeah, I chased them out of the UK. They had to go to Greece.
As soon as you get there, they leave.
Yeah, it was pretty good timing, actually, if you think about it. So, but yes,
How
I
many
definitely am looking forward to round the table gaming again.
how many games are you streaming nowadays?
At the moment, I'm doing a thing where I'm just a player, which is great. I'm not actually GMing. So I have a private game that I run for some players on a Sunday, which is a lot of fun. Literally this last Sunday, the players are on this massive battleship in the middle of the ocean, and the drow in my world have got these aquatic sort of ships that look like a spider cross squid, and it attached on the underside of this battleship. And so the players, they're all level 9, and they're like, oh, okay. And the druid turns into a sperm whale, which is it's a gigantic creature. It's a CR8. So he turns into the sperm whale and dives overboard. The bard uses polymorph because of his build, and he turns into a sperm whale. So these two sperm whales are just swimming around, beating the snot out of this poor drow ship.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're a lot of fun to play with. But on Thursday nights, I have a live stream where the public had to sign up, and they come and run a game as the GM. And myself and 4 other players then play in the game, and then we give them a score at the end of the session. And that score is on how well it is a GM and a whole bunch of different categories. But the idea is then that they come back the following week, and then they try and improve on some of those scores. So you might score lowly on your NPC descriptions.
Yeah.
And it's because you don't describe them, and you don't give them. Anyway, that's what I'm doing.
Pressure, huh?
Oh God, no! I feel so sorry for the guys coming on. They're like, "Wait, we have to do this live in front of how many thousand people, and we're being judged, and everyone's seeing our scores." No, I have to say, we did it because we're like, well, we think this would be a cool thing to do. Do we think anybody else will be interested? And I think the day we put up the call for people to sign up, it was fully booked for 12 weeks. And we're like, okay. So there are people out there who are definitely interested in doing it. But
my God,
yeah.
guy, it feels like a nightmare to me more than a fun thing to do. It's like, it's that dream you have where you're in front of your class presenting in your underwear.
And then you're getting judged on that underwear. So yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we don't kink shame here. Whatever people into, that's absolutely their thing.
That's it. But yeah, so that's been a lot of fun. And then I do have a live stream. Well, it's not going to be a live stream. It's a pre-recorded playthrough coming up in July. We're doing a thing where I've just finished writing a rule system for a science fiction role-playing game. And so we're going to be playing that in July because we've declared July as Sci July. So it's like sci-fi July. Because like every month has got its thing, like Mapvember and this and that. So we're like, July is science fiction month because it's Sci July, right? So I'll be doing that.
I got a thing to promote. July is Sci July.
July is Sci July, right? Because Sci August doesn't really work, and Sci June Fi. No, anyway. So
what are you working on? Like, I saw something just when I was grabbing a link from your website to put in the description, and as always, folks, links are in the description. And I saw something on there about another RPG. I'm like, what is this? And
that's
right. What do you got going on, man?
So when was it? In February, my partner was like, I want to role play. I was like, that's great. Let's do some role playing. And then I brought out all the role playing books, and he was like, that's too much reading. That's too many rules. And the dice
Yeah.
have to remember what all the different dice are. I mean, we all know the barrier to entry in terms of role playing. If you've never done it before, you have to try and figure out what a D20 is as opposed to a D12 and whatnot. Anyway, so he challenged me. He said, is there a role playing game out there that has no dice and is yes or no answers? So I don't have to read 1,000 rules and this, that, and the next thing. And I said, well, I didn't think there was. There are some out there that use a Jenga tower, which is as simple as it can get, I think.
But yeah, there's cards. There's all kinds of different resource management.
Correct. But there isn't one specifically, whether it's either yes or no.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And there are things like Fiasco where you're kind of collectively telling a story, and you're using dice not to roll an outcome, but just to keep track of how many things you can do or whatever.
I think, didn't Margaret Weiss do a Marvel superheroes game where they use like beads or something?
There's some that have used beads. There's some that use M&Ms, which is great because you eat the M&M when you use it. So that's a fun one.
Definitely not diabetic friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I went, okay, cool. Well, then let me try and make this game. Because at first I said it's impossible. And I actually made a video on it where I was talking about game design, and I went, I don't think it's possible. But then I got to thinking about it, and eventually I came up with a system where I'm like, you know what, this might actually work. So I put it together, and we did a vote on what setting it should be, whether it should be fantasy or sci-fi or whatever. And people came back and they said, let's do sci-fi, because there's a lot of fantasy systems out there. For me, the simplest fantasy role-playing game that I've ever encountered was Steve Jackson's fighting fantasy series, which was a D6. And that was it, or 2d6. I think that was the extent of it. So, yeah. So we did Bounty Hunter. We've just got it back from press, which is quite cool. And it's a soft cover book because it's 32 pages long in terms of rules. So it's really rules light. And then it's got a setting book in it. So that's what we've been working on. And playing it, a lot of people have fun playing it because, like I said, there's no dice. You either can do something or you can't do something, but there is resource management, which is very, very simple. And it kind of keeps the game flowing and the game going. So
yeah. How do you determine, success and failure without some kind of random engine?
Well, this was the biggest challenge was A, how do you determine that? And B, how do you set up levels of difficulty, right? Because if it's either yes, you do it, or no, you don't. Well, am I a better pilot than that pilot? No, because you can both pilot. You can both do this, you can both do that. So where it comes in is every single player character or an NPC has a thing called an action point pool. So you have a pool of 20 action points. If you have the skill piloting, for example, which is actually called vehicle operations, if you have vehicle operations and you want to fly the starship from point A to point B, you spend 1 action point and you fly the starship from point A to point B. There is no chance of you failing to fly that starship from point A to point B. But within a 24-hour period, you only have 20 action points. So when you get into combat, if you have range combat and you shoot at your opponent, you hit. There's no risk of you missing. There is 0 chance of you missing. There is no armor class. The best that your opponent can do is try and dodge out of the way. But then there's a little bit of a mechanic on determining on who goes first. And to go first, you spend an action point. So if you want to go first, you spend an action point. If you want to dodge, you will dodge. There's no question about success or failure. So there's no contest per se. It's just spending these points. And what happens is the tension in the game, which you would normally get from your random roll of, well, will I succeed or won't I succeed? Here, it's a case of, I can succeed, but is this the right thing for me to be doing right now? Is this the right resource to be burning at this particular point? Can I think of a way where I don't have to use a skill to role play my way through the situation rather than to mechanically crunch my way through the situation. So when you go into combat, a disruptor rifle, for example, if it hits you and you know that it will hit you, chance is not on your side. There is zero chance they will miss unless you are dodging. But if they hit you, that's going to deal 8 action points worth of damage to you. So from your 20, you're suddenly down to 12. If he hits you again, you've got 4 action points left. And when you reach 0 action points, you automatically fail at everything that you attempt to do. And if you take damage again, you are unconscious. So your action points are your health as well as your ability to actually succeed at those tasks. So it's a lot of thinking going, hey, if I go into this combat, I'm going to lose a lot of points. How do I get out of the combat? Once the combat's done, I'm not going to jump into my starship and fly away because I need to spend points to do that. So I need to be very clever and careful about the whole thing. So the theme is bounty hunters, and throughout the book, we've got little sayings from the bounty hunter guild master. And most of them are, if you don't have a plan on how you're going to get out of the situation, plan on being in a body bag because that's what it's going to be. And a lot of people are skeptical. I mean, I was skeptical. I mean, I made a whole video saying this is impossible, but we have play tested it now literally all over the world with a whole bunch of different players. And at the end of it, they're like, I'm exhausted. We were thinking so much in terms of trying to role play our answers and think of our answers from a strategic perspective that they didn't even notice that they weren't rolling. And I mean, you know that you can have a D&D session where you don't roll a single die for a session and people still have a blast.
So like, using D&D as an example, modern D&D games are designed to test the characters, where the original versions of the game were really designed to test the players.
Exactly.
So it sounds like you're going back to that a little bit more.
Yes.
That, because in original D&D, getting into a fight might be the end of your character.
I remember those terrifying days.
Yeah, or like, there was a lot more puzzles and traps that you kind of had to work your way around, right? And it wasn't about what was on your character sheet. There wasn't very much there that had anything to do with anything that was going on.
That's right.
So it feels like, those kind of vibes.
That's it. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit, I loved second edition Dungeons and Dragons, where you had weapon proficiencies and non-weapon proficiencies. And your character might have 4 non-weapon proficiencies, which were just sort of big group clusters of abilities. But as you say, you as the player were far more taxed in terms of coming up with solutions.
Yeah. I mean, I think in first edition, it might even said, assume the character knows what the player knows, right? And, so like if you knew how to build a catapult, like, and you could explain it to Gary Gygax, I think he would let you build a catapult.
And to be honest with you, I was on a podcast the other day where I was chatting to people and I was saying, I think that is something that we've lost in role playing, where I remember as a teenager going, I have no idea what a trebuchet is. Let me go and research what on earth a trebuchet is. And this was before YouTube and watching YouTube videos on what a trebuchet was. You'd have to go to a library and open up a book or go to Alta Vista or AOL or whatever it was and put in some time to understand these concepts. And I think a lot of what's been happening since the early editions is this whole idea of streamlining, but also of reducing things down to not the lowest common denominator, but an accessible common denominator. So things are easier for people who don't want to go and research history and don't want to go and learn all of these other bits and pieces over and above the game. They just want to play the game. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that perhaps there is a space for us to go back to trying to think of creative solutions rather than have a mechanical solution that does it for us, I guess. And I think
Yeah,
yeah,
I would say like first and second edition were fairly simple. It was that it's just that the rules that were there were very convoluted and
yeah,
unnecessarily difficult, right? Like, and then with third edition, we added a whole lot of stuff to the game, right? And that's
yeah,
where it became more about what the character can do and
yes,
mathematically kind of like scaling it out. But then the game, as the game became more narrative driven, it was like, well, what can the character do if this was like a character, in a book or a story? And it also became more action oriented, more pulpy in nature, right? So the things that the characters were doing are more fantastical. Um,
yeah, yeah,
and
absolutely.
and so so it kind of like that, that's where the divide between player and character started growing even more so. And it's so, I there's things that I enjoy about both aspects,
Oh
right?
yes, 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 absolutely.
And like in some regards, like, we have all these mechanical things in the game, and when you take them, if you can kind of defeat the circumstances of the game with using player knowledge as opposed to those things, it feels like your choices in the game and building your character didn't matter.
Right.
Um, and also at the same time, like I've heard the argument, well, the fighter doesn't really have to be able to swing a sword in order to do what they want. Where when someone's like, well, if you can't role play this situation, then you shouldn't be able to do it. So
Right.
it's like all
Absolutely.
these like tension points that conflict with each other.
That's it. That's it. And I don't think you'd ever get to a point where you go, well, this is the right way or this is the wrong way. I have a role playing book, a system that was designed by a Finnish role playing GM. It also doesn't have any dice in it. But what happens is you describe to the GM what you're doing, and the GM will go, okay, well, what you said makes sense. So I'm going to say that you got 3 points. And the difficulty that I thought the task was going to be was 2 points. So you succeed. So if you just say, I hit the character, that's like 1 point. But if you say, I swipe in low towards his knee and at the last moment cut upwards underneath his arm, trying to get into the blank space between the armor, he might go, well, that's pretty cool. That'll give you 3 points. Because that makes more sense, because that's how you would fight if you were using this kind of weapon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the example was in a post-apocalyptic environment, the character comes across a car and they're trying to repair the vehicle. And he's like, you don't have to know how to repair a vehicle, but if you say you go and scavenge parts from other vehicles, that gives you 1 point. If you say that you then clean those parts with some kind of cleaning solution or whatever, that gives you another point. If you say that in your backstory you listed that your father used to run a mechanic shop before the apocalypse, that'll give you another point. So you're stacking up points and things. Someone in chat was like, yeah, but that's an interpretation of player knowledge versus GM knowledge, because if the GM has no idea what's going on and you just bamboozle them with this whole thing, they might just go, yeah, that sounds totally real, so yeah, whereas if you have the mechanics are immutable, so it's easy to judge whether you succeed or not. Anyway, I don't know, maybe I'm just too old and grumpy.
Amen. Although I'm kind of like, I'm kind of like, well, you know what? If the player does a good job of bamboozling me, I'm like, and and I find their explanation entertaining, I think it's worth the points, right? Like
that's it, right? Yeah.
The reality doesn't really matter. I'm not a mechanic, and what little I do know,
right?
I'm not going to hold that against
exactly.
the player. So.
Exactly. I think a good example of that, though, is like Star Trek. And I would love to play a Star Trek RPG. And there are a couple good ones that are out there. There's Modifius is one, and there's the Decipher one, sort of way back when. And both of them are great systems and have great components to them and really portray the Star Trek genre and the tone. but none of them can compensate for someone like me who's a diehard Trekkie and will run a multi-phase spectral scan every time the quantum flux inverter needs to be recalibrated because the quantum resonance imager is offline, and so I've found a couple other players who are as crazy as I am and who love all that kind of terminology and who've watched all of the episodes enough times to be able to go, no, that quantum phase induction is definitely a science thing. It's not an engineering thing. But GMs who don't know that, there is just this wall of techno babble.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just want the Klingon to shoot you. It's like, yes, but we've, flooded subspace with tachyon particles, so they can't cloak anymore. Ha ha! And yeah, that's the extreme, of course. But yeah.
That can go for a lot of different things. Like I played in a Star Wars game,
right,
where the GM would like hand out experience for basically what would be considered trivia, right?
Yes.
Which is very, I mean, it's novel and some of the players really got into it, but if you're not a huge Star Wars buff, like you feel like you're being penalized in that game.
Yeah, absolutely.
For what you don't know. Yeah, so, so it can be tricky to navigate, but I also feel like as a GM, like I would be an amateur techno babble and be like, okay, that all sounds good. Make a roll, and be like, let's see how well let's see if you missed any spots with your tachyon.
Right, exactly.
But so I feel like there can definitely be some middle ground where we can meet in the middle.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's always about moderation and reading your group and playing to the group,
So how did your partner like the game that you came up with?
Oh, absolutely loves it, which is great. So we're doing more role playing as a result of that, which is super cool. But what I loved is that, when I first started writing the book, the rules, it was really straightforward and it was almost fitted on a single page. But after our first session, already my partner was like, but if I want to do that, how can I prove that I'm better than that guy? I'm like, well, you can't with these kind of mechanics. We need a differentiator, and then you're starting to add in modifiers, which is math.
Yeah.
Or you're starting to add in pips, which I have personally never liked. I think it was the old, what was it? The White Wolf series, Mage and Vampire, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. The pips that would fill out your pool.
Yeah. So what was great was seeing that Bounty Hunter, as it's written, you play it once or twice, you know exactly how it works. But we then added in a small chapter on, okay, now you've got your new players interested in this thing. Now you want to make it a little bit more like a role-playing game with a bit more, not mechanics, but a bit more of an angle. So then there's a whole thing on how you can bet action points against each other to create levels of difference. So instead of just spending 1 AP point, you can say, all right, GM, I really want to outmaneuver this pilot. I'm spending 5.
Yeah.
And the GM secretly has determined that the opposing pilot might have only spent 3. So now you're starting to create those levels of differentiation. So we had to put them in there because, as I said, everyone played it
almost like blind
cool.
bets.
Yeah, exactly. It became a blind bet. So whenever I'm designing a game or adding in a homebrew, I always go back to the mantra of where's the tension. And if you look at D&D, there's multiple points of tension. The dice are just one set of tension, right? The random number. But then you've got the character build and you've got the modifier build, and then that's all versus the predetermined values of the monsters or the GM's encounter. So whenever we add in mechanics, I always sit back and say, well, does this add more tension or does it just add complication? Because I feel like sometimes a lot of the stuff that D&D does at higher levels is no longer adding tension, it's just adding complication. Because they had to, right?
Yeah.
You just have to be able to do more at level 12 than you did at level 7. But what you're doing is not ratcheting tension. You're just adding in more stuff to do at the same sort of anyway.
Yeah, that was always my kind of problem with third edition, and and Pathfinder when comparing it to a game like 5th edition. I'm like,
Mm.
you just have a bunch of arbitrary +1s and +2s for all these extra decisions you're making, right? So
Right. Yeah.
now I would say Pathfinder 2e has done a much better job
Mm.
of taking all these extra choices and making them affect your character in different ways
Yeah.
that are a
Yeah.
bit more interesting than 1st edition or 3.5 did.
Yes. Yeah.
We had a GM when we would play Cipher System. He would set the challenges or the DCs, but he wouldn't tell us what they were. But he would put them out on the table covered, right?
Right.
And then we would roll against them, and then they would reveal them or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess
It's not a bad idea at all. It isn't a bad idea. And something that I've started to do with 5th edition, which my GMs did way back when we were still dealing with Thaco and Second Ed, is that when the characters go into combat, I now give my players the armor classes of the monsters that they're fighting. And then I tell my players, don't tell me that you hit. Don't even tell me your number. Just describe if you hit them, how you hit them, and roll your damage. So it takes away a whole step of roll your die. Oh, I got a 22. Okay, check the AC. Yes, you hit. What's your damage? It's a case of, the AC is 12. Do your attack. Drop. Oh, I did 15 damage as I stabbed forward or did this. And a lot of me, when I was putting it into place, I was like, but this is taking away something, right? This is taking away that unknown element. To a degree, and for younger players, and by younger players, I mean people who don't have a lot of experience with it, with 5th edition anyway. Yes, it does. But to an older player, if the guy's wearing scale mail and he's got a shield and he's moving around the battlefield, his armor class is not going to be 22 unless, surprise, he's got some magical item or something along those lines. You kind of know the range that it's going to be. So are you really losing that much drama?
And after round 2, everyone's attacked that guy. And
exactly.
we've seen a bunch of different numbers already, and we figured out what the number is. So yeah, there's definitely that part of it for sure, that it doesn't matter. And and I've definitely played with GMs. It'll just be like, this is the AC. Anyone that made this saving throw. It just takes out some extra talking that doesn't really matter, I guess.
Yeah, but again, it depends on what your background is. I mean, I have one player where I introduced the system, and they're like, "Yeah, it's a cool system," and yet the player still tells me every time what they roll to hit.
Yeah,
and they're like, "I rolled this, so I hit," and I'm like, "Yes, you did. You don't need me to tell you that you hit. You know that it hit." But they're just so entrenched in this idea, So
this is how we've always done it. We're not going to change that now. Yeah.
Don't you come here with your new fandangled ways. But anyway.
Nice. So people can pick up Bounty Hunter is what I'm hearing over on your site now.
Yes, they can. Yes, if they go to the website greatgamemaster.com, they can pick up the PDF. But soon, hopefully, they'll be able to pick up a hard copy as well.
Nice.
Although hard copy is the wrong word, because it's
Soft
specifically
pack.
Printed on soft, and it's just stapled. I'm like, what? But it kind of works because it's not a full rule book. So, and most of the rule book is character creation, because that was something that we focused very specifically on. So
how is there advancement in that system?
There is, although it's based on your reputation. So the more bounties that you bring home, the more reputation you earn. And at various intervals, after a certain number of bounties or a certain number of heroic actions that have warranted attention, you then get a few more action points to spend. You can unlock certain additional skills, because everyone only starts with, I think it's 12 skills out of the 38 or the 40 skills in total. So slowly you can advance, but even at maximum level, you still only have about 20 out of those 40 skills. So you'll never be able to do everything anyway. But the whole idea is it's teamwork, and you're a group of bounty hunters working together, or a bounty hunter and techies, because you don't have to be a bounty hunter. You can be a pilot or an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever.
Support staff,
So,
very
yeah,
important.
absolutely, yeah.
Nice. I can see the advanced rules already. Like,
Oh yeah,
you could have certain abilities that you automatically get an action point in, so you don't have to
that's
spend to
it.
do it.
That's it. So yeah, there are some basic special abilities at the moment. Everyone gets one, which does
Right.
allow for a little bit of differentiation. But really, where your character is different from everybody else's character is your backstory. So the character creation process is there are 9 steps that you follow, and one step is naming your character, and one step's buying equipment. So it's really only seven steps, and each step takes you through your character's history. So you choose your birth story, and there are, I think there's 10 paragraphs that you choose from. So one of them is, you were born an orphan, all your parents are dead, life is miserable, you grew up on the streets as a tough, rough rapscallion. You know, it ranges all the way through to you were born on a star cruiser. So you actually choose the paragraph that is your birth story.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just insert 2 names into that, and that becomes your little backstory for that particular incident. So by the time you finish character creation, you've got a 1-page backstory that's got 12 hooks in it for a GM to use, or for you to use as your character's backstory stuff. But each of those little backstory points comes with the skills that you get as a result of being an orphan who ended up in a slave pit and who fought their way to freedom and were working as a smuggler for a crime cartel before they became a bounty hunter type of thing. So you don't choose your skills so much as you choose your backstory, and that then gives you your skills. So a lot of people like that, because literally you walk away with a backstory that works.
What's the average character creation time? Do you know?
Yeah. So if you have to read each of those little backstory pieces, I think it'll take you roughly half an hour if you have to read each one and kind of choose which one you want. But we have made a deal with Foundry VTT to host Bounty Hunter, which we're hoping that will be ready mid-June. We're already we've already got the whole system working, but we're just in testing to make sure it works properly. In that one, you can make a character if you know what those paragraphs are, and you pretty much pick them up after you've read them a couple times. You can make an entire character with equipment purchase in just under 4 minutes.
Love it. That's
Yeah.
like I am so hard pressed to play not D&D, just because D&D Beyond has spoiled me so much.
Right.
I'm like, a couple clicks and you've got like a character.
That's it. Yeah, and it is as simple as that. You just click through your backstories. It automatically gives you your skills. You choose 2 skills, depending on the size of your party, and you're golden. Add in your equipment and off you go. So
nice.
Yeah, and people have really responded well to that. And it's not to say that you cannot create your own backstories. It's just a case of, well, you can make your own, absolutely fine, but here are 10 of them. So the number of combinations, I don't know, someone did the maths once, but there's at least 5 steps worth of paragraphs, and there's 10 or 8 paragraphs per step that you can choose from. So there are a lot of combinations that you can come up with.
So it's going to be a while before people have the same characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably by then we'll have released an expansion, because we're looking at it, we're going, well, this was really cool, but giant space mechs might be equally cool, because who doesn't like giant space robots and stuff?
So are those really, really big bounties?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're going to take down a bigger bounty.
So is there also, you said there's a setting that goes with it as well?
That's right. Yeah. So once we finish writing the rules, and this for me was a first, we did it as a Kickstarter, just a little 2-week Kickstarter. And we got people from that Kickstarter onto a Discord server, and we said, okay, guys, well, what are we going to do? What do you want in a role-playing kind of space? And everyone said, well, we like sci-fi, but what sci-fi? Is it Star Wars? Is it Star Trek? Is it Aliens? Is it Firefly? Is it Mandalorian? We're like, no, it's none of those things because we don't have $100 billion to buy the rights for licensing. It's a generic sci-fi.
So wait, you had like almost 600 backers for this project that you virtually did secretly.
Yes.
Like I accidentally found out about this bounty hunters thing.
Yes.
And I went to your website and it wasn't even 100% clear that it was something that you did or exactly what it was. I just kind of like glanced at it and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to ask Guy about that. So
we're very bad when it comes to promoting stuff that we're doing. To be honest with you, Kickstarter used to did a thing in early February called Zine Quest.
Yeah.
Which is a black and white little printed magazine type thing. And that's what we started doing. So some of the backers actually have the black and white version of the book, which is the original Zine Quest. But halfway through Zine Quest, we had so many people saying, can you do this in color and as an A4 rather than an A5 or, a full proper size book?
Yeah.
That we went, yep, Zine Quest was fun, but we're going to do it as a bigger project. And it just grew and grew. So we got all these folks from Kickstarter onto Discord. And we had an amazing time of just throwing out ideas and building this sort of space. So the setting book, there's 20 planets in the setting book, and each planet has got a list of cities and sort of specific locations and stuff. So it's enough for you as a GM to go, oh yeah, you travel to the planet Torrin 5 and Torrin 5, and there's a whole bunch of names of NPCs and buildings. And it's all about making sure that as a GM, you have this sci-fi space, which is just sci-fi enough that you have starships that travel around faster than the speed of light. But isn't Star Trek, so you don't have to know all of that fancy stuff. And it isn't Star Wars, so there isn't the Force floating around. It's really just a kind of a Firefly type space, where it's cowboys in space, I guess. But
with
it's
a little more sci-fi elements, more aliens and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's lots of it. Yeah, exactly. So that's the big thing, is that we have aliens, and that was super cool because a lot of the aliens came out of role-playing, of play tests with the Discord guys, and they're like, well, you've listed here this alien race that supposedly can change shape. I'm like, yeah, that was just something that we put in because we thought it'd be cool. And they're like, well, what is its color? And what does it smell like? I'm like, I don't know what it's, okay, fine. We'll put it into the settings book. Okay, this is what it smells like. How does it reproduce? And it was such an interesting organic process.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm ever going to do anything else ever again without getting together with a bunch of people. And a lot of people are like, well, what about this? And you're like, no, I don't think so. Great idea, but not for this one. So yeah, it was a lot of.
I like the tagline: "Seek, catch, cash, repeat."
Exactly right.
I'm a little miffed at you, Guy. I'm not gonna lie.
Why?
Yeah, I wish you would have let me know. That we definitely would have liked to let people know about what you're doing. And
when we were doing it, we were actually doing another Kickstarter at the same time.
Yeah,
and this was really just. This was basically a love letter that I created for my partner.
Yeah.
And then we put it out there to see what the response was like. We didn't realize it was going to be as strong as it was, which was amazing.
That's cool. Congratulations. What was the other one you were doing?
The other one is Epic Battle Maps.
Yeah, it was during the maps. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So that one is also, they both kind of finished at exactly the same time. So the Epic Battle Maps is in print at the moment. And that is a whole different ball game altogether.
Yeah. Because I remember you telling me about that and having the you had to figure out or invent like a way to make them, right? Like
that's it. The
technology wasn't exactly there yet.
No. So each book is handmade, which is insane. So this is the prototype here.
Yeah.
And each book is handmade because the maps fold out like a travelogue. So you get this really long map, right?
Handmade. That sounds expensive now.
Well, the saddest part for us, I mean, because there's 30 maps in here, and the book weighs just under 2 pounds. It's quite heavy because it's got a metal binder at the back, so it stays in shape and stuff like that. The saddest part is the shipping. And the shipping, we spent more time trying to figure out shipping than we did really figuring out the book, which
Yeah.
is sad. Because the book, I think, it was another company that came to us and said, hey, we've got this idea. I thought it was a brilliant idea for a book. But with shipping with COVID, it was just nuts. It's like, hang on, shipping to this country costs more than the actual book. How does that make sense? But thankfully, Nord Games, they do a lot of stuff. They came to our rescue to try and bring the shipping price down in the US anyway.
They're friends of the channel, and we actually work with them as well. Highly recommend them to anyone who's looking to get fulfillment, and they offer some really good incentives if you use more of their services. So
yeah, that's it. But they're just friendly people, and they're like,
yes,
they backed the project, and then they sent us an email saying, hey, we can help you with your shipping costs, at least for the US and Canada. We're like, sure, let's bring it on board.
Yeah, they're really good people. Chris is an awesome dude, and I know, like, I asked him for a consult for something, and and I'm like, how much, and he's just like, don't worry about it, just like, when you want to get together, what do you want to talk about? So
let's talk about it.
So, but the industry's full of people like that too, I will say.
It is, and for me, I think that's one of the exciting things, or one of the nice things is that it's still, as a space, we're in that transition, because I look at it and I see more professional GMs and people who are charging to run games, more and more and more and more and more of those people out there. And you're going, well, this is exactly what sports did. Sports used to just be a way for people to let off steam and that sort of thing. And then it slowly started to professionalize. And esports is exactly the same. I mean, when I was a computer gamer, there was no such thing as multiple satellite television channels broadcasting esports, right? And I think that when you look at it, you go, well, I think role-playing is kind of going to go in a similar direction, as crazy as that sounds. But it's not there yet. And what that means is that it is still usually family businesses that are bringing together bits and pieces, or friends who are role players who are putting together products. There's very few corporates. I mean, the big guys, obviously, but the majority of the creators at the moment, I would say, are independent people. And as a result, it's friendlier, I think.
Also, it's a smaller space too, and like, if you end up being a D-bag, it doesn't take long before everyone realizes who the D-bags are.
Right.
And then you're going to really you're going to do everything by yourself.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's true too. Absolutely. Yeah.
It is a lot easier to get things done and accomplish things when you have friends and people that are supportive. So
yeah, without a doubt.
No need to be an island.
No.
So what's next then? You've just been pumping things out lately.
Oh man. Yes. Next. Well, at the moment we're just finishing off the Kickstarters and getting things shipped out and that sort of thing. And like I said, that's been an interesting one. And I think people don't realize, you go, well, how are you going to ship a book to the other side of the planet? And you go, oh, I'll put it in the post. Sure. How are you going to ship 3,000 to 3,000 separate addresses? A lot of people, I think, don't realize that is what goes into the process, and is more critical than the actual process, I think, to a large degree. So, yeah, next up, we're doing, like I said, we're doing Sci July, where I'll be running Bounty Hunter for some players. And then I am starting on my next book, because I'm insane. That one is not a rule book. It's back to advice based on what I have learned over the last few years as a game master and working with the community, on how to build and to make your campaigns. So that's what the book is going to focus on. At the moment, we have How to Create Epic Campaigns, which was my very first book,
Yeah.
which people really seem to respond to. And I read that and I go, oh, that is so 2018. So many things have changed since then,
Yeah.
And people still occasionally show me a video where they're like, do you remember this video where you said online role playing was evil and was going to cause the end of all role playing as we know it?
Uh-huh.
I'm like, yes, I remember that video because I filmed it only 5 years ago. And you look at Epic Campaigns, the advice there is great, but it's one aspect. And what I've learned since then, there are two other approaches that you can take, and it's like I've got to put these down and get them out there and help people. So
what type of books do you like to make? Do you prefer those kinds of books, or do you like the one you just did with bounty hunters?
So I will confess this, but I will deny it to my dying day, except for the record that you have here. But we know that doesn't count.
That doesn't count.
Deny it, right? Creating something like Bounty Hunter for me is incredibly personally rewarding because I get to create a space, a science fiction world with aliens and characters and things that are of my own creation. And I get other people to go, this is a cool space to play in. So that's a very rewarding thing to have come back to you, especially, I mean, as a fan of Star Wars and Star Trek and stuff, you look at people like George Lucas and Gene Roddenberry and you go, wow, they created this world-changing series. Bounty Hunter is not a world-changing series, but it is a little happy space for a couple of people to play in. And that for me is reward enough. Whereas when I look at Epic Campaigns, which is more instructional, the reward, because there is definitely still a reward, is getting people, getting letters from people saying, I wasn't sure I wanted to be a GM. Then I read your book and now I have confidence to run my first game. That for me is like, well, that's all, that's worth it now. But it's a different thing. I guess it's kind of like your construction worker standing on the side of the highway. Because I was a lecturer for 20 years before I moved into GMing, I'm used to getting that rush from students saying, oh, this has helped me see or understand a concept or a principle in a different way. I still enjoy it, but it isn't that sort of heady rush that maybe it should be. I don't know. So they're different.
It doesn't have the newness.
Yeah, it doesn't have the newness to it, and they feed kind of two different parts of my ego, I guess. But
so it doesn't sound like you had been planning to write an RPG.
No, I was not. But having said that, one of the big requests for Bounty Hunter was people were like, but how would magic work? And I have to tell you, I'm one of those people where you give me a problem to think about and I will think about it, whether I want to or not.
Yeah.
And so Mage Hunter, because I'm an original when it comes to names, right? So Mage Hunter, which is the fantasy version.
Yeah. If one works, why not?
Well, the funny thing is that I had already written a magic system. And then we decided on sci-fi. So I was like, okay, well, right. I don't need that, right?
We got Bounty Hunter.
So we got Bounty Hunter.
We got Mage Hunter. We need Sci Hunter. And I don't know where else we can go from there. But then you can just combine it all into the Hunter book.
That's it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not a plan. It's just, it's an intellectual exercise, which if it leads to other people being able to have fun, well, why not? So anyway.
Yeah, we get that question. We've gotten that question over the years. Like, are you going to make your own game?
Right.
I'm always like, I don't know. There's a lot of really good games out there. Yes. I don't know what I'm going to do different or better than already exists. So why would I make my own game? Yes. And I always love it when someone comes on who's made their own game. And like, I love to hear why they did it. Right. Like at this point, if we were to make another game, it would really just be to make money and have our own thing.
Yes,
because I haven't found the problem that I feel like I personally need to solve. Uh,
exactly.
so it's cool when I hear other people go, you know, this is what this is what I see the problem is, or you, in your case, you're challenged by someone going, I want to play a game that's easy to learn, it's fast, and I don't have to roll dice or manage
Mm.
resource. Really, a complex resource management system, and you're like, here it is. Somebody else, or say like, they're like, I want to make a game that you can be played in 45 minutes.
Right.
And I was like, oh, well, that's an interesting concept to me. Like, that's a cool starting spot. But then, like, when I hear someone go, I'm like, well, why did you do that? And they're like, oh, I just wanted to be different. I'm like, oh, okay, why? Why'd you bother?
Right. Yeah, I agree with you completely, and I think, as I said before, I think we spoke before about this, is if there isn't a goal, you're
Yeah.
never going to get there. And I have had a lot of people say, oh, I'm busy writing my own system, and you go, okay, cool, well, how finished is it? Oh, no, it's not yet finished. How long have you been writing it for? About
10
15
years,
years.
20
And you're like,
years. Yeah.
that dedication I don't have. I don't have. I
Yeah.
have the attention span of a lemming. So if
Honestly,
if it's not done in 6 months, it's like, why?
honestly, at that point, it just really feels like an exercise in mental masturbation, right?
I think
Uh,
it's a bit of a passion.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
You
yeah.
need, like you said, you need goals. You need a reason to be doing this, solving a problem, fulfilling a need
Yeah.
that isn't being met someplace else.
And I think, I mean, I don't know whether you agree with me on this one or not, is a lot of what we're seeing now in the role playing space, and it's not a new thing, but it seems to be a lot more common thing, is for people to go, oh, we have the rights to produce The Expanse, or we have the rights to produce Stranger Things. We're going to use a new role play. We're going to come up with a new dice system or a new role playing system. Or we're going to try and take this existing system that was written for fantasy and try and jam sci-fi into it. Personally, I'm like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Should new settings have new systems, or should we stick with the old systems and try and rework them to fit?
There are a lot of like really good generic systems that
Yes.
are really good for tweaking like that, to like
Yes.
tweak them
Yes.
towards a specific setting. Uh,
Exactly.
I,
Exactly.
I also know people, they just don't like generic systems. Like, they
Yeah.
want the system to be, the engine that drives a particular world or setting.
Right. Right.
Where I'm kind of indifferent on
Right.
that.
Yeah.
I've seen, like, I've seen where sometimes you just have an idea for a game and it doesn't exist, so some of the generic systems work pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Have you seen the Star Wars 5th edition? There was a group of fans who did an amazing Star Wars conversion of 5th
I'm
edition.
like aware of it, and like,
Yeah.
I know, like, my son was playing in a campaign for a little while, and like he would come to me with questions, and mostly about, like, if I guess, like, he wanted to bring an argument to his DM. I feel like most of the time, because I'm always like, well, what's your DM want to do?
Right.
Yeah, so like, he was playing in a game for a while, and I know a couple other people. I've not really looked
Yeah.
at it yet, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's beautifully done. I haven't looked too deeply into it because when they first, I first got hold of it, they didn't have starship combat.
Oh yeah.
And for me, I'm like, well, if it's a sci-fi or a sci-fantasy or whatever you want to call it, if you have spaceships, I want to know how that combat works, because there are a whole bunch of bugbears I have with sci-fi combat systems. Yeah, so they have now added in combat. And I look at it and I go, well, D20 Modern is still one of my favorite role-playing systems of all time, which is just
Yeah.
D&D 3.5, but retweaked into a modern day setting. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. I mean, Modifius, they've got their 2D20 system, and they've now got Dune, they've got Star Trek, they've got Fallout 3 or Fallout 99 or whatever it is that they call it. I forget the name. Plus a whole bunch of other franchises that they're doing. They're bringing out Homeworld as well, in their 2D20 system. So
Yeah, there's been a lot of licenses floating around.
yeah, yeah,
The I would so the one problem I would like to see solved is
yeah.
when they get these licensing for someone to figure out how to actually gain penetration into those fandoms. I don't really
Yes.
feel like they ever achieve that. I feel like they pay a lot of money for a license to then sell a role playing game to people that are already playing role playing games.
Right.
But I don't feel like they're really penetrating the fandom.
I completely agree with you. If you look at Modifius' Star Trek, right? You go, Star Trek is one of the biggest fandoms out there, and it has been since the 70s. That is a giant market. When you release a role-playing game, surely that's what every Trekkie wants to do, is role play inside the Enterprise. So why is it that when you look at the sort of return,
Yeah.
yes, they're bringing out lots of books, which implies they're selling a lot of copies, but it's not like it's suddenly superseded D&D as the role-playing system.
Yeah. They're just selling to the
You know,
same people. They're not expanding.
they're not expanding into those fandoms, and I think that is the barrier that role-playing has. Is it's either overly complex, so a casual fan who would love to be on a starship goes, yeah, but there's all those rules that we have to learn, and there's all of the dice and the thing and the da 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 da. It's just too much. I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting one, and I mean, it's that big question: why has role playing gotten into this golden age where we have hundreds of role playing games being printed across the world, and you've got Critical Role doing its giant numbers thing? What got that cascade to start
There's
on
been
such a big scale?
there's been a lot of chatter, right, on
Yeah.
like what campaign 2 ending for Critical Role.
Right.
And I think they're working on their own game. I think I've heard those rumors.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to see what happens as a space, because I feel like the next game they play is not going to be a game that someone else made. Right? They're going to be playing their own game.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that'll be kind of the thing to topple, that huge fandom into other RPGs, or if they'll only just go from D&D to just the Critical Role game.
I mean, it's an amazing thought experiment,
Uh,
because if suddenly Critical Role has a drop off of numbers, then you kind of know, okay, it is definitely the system.
yeah.
But if their numbers continue, you're like, interesting. So it's a fan wave rather than a fan, than role players.
Yeah, well, it does seem
Oh,
like too, like, I don't know how true it is, but you always hear like they've got like tons of people that watch their show but never played
right.
D&D, have never played
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
They're not D&D players. Like, and so I guess that's the other thing we'll kind of see, what it looks like,
Yeah.
when they do that. I'm always excited to see these experiments happen.
Yes. Especially when you're not involved.
Yeah,
So
when you don't
can
have
kind of
any
sit
skin
back
in the
and go,
game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, it could be a train wreck, or it could be like something new and awesome. Who knows?
That's it.
I think they'll be okay though.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
No, I don't have any doubt on that.
they'll just do another Kickstarter for $10 million and
Yeah. Yeah.
so. So we are just past the hour mark, which went by super fast.
Always does.
I know. So with that, final thoughts before we head on out.
Oh man. Final thoughts, I would say, is I think it's evident from today's conversation that you find your group of role players, you find your role playing system, and you just have fun.
That's a great final thought. Remember, links are in the description. Go check out Bounty Hunters. I had no idea that was going to be a huge topic for today, but it's been fun. And until next time, stay nerdy.